Welcome to You Heard It From Us, the podcast where adventure meets advice. I'm DnDWife, your artistic storyteller and dedicated miniature painter.
And I'm Dungeon Master Eguile, your seasoned storyteller with a flair for epic tales and a passion for bringing our worlds to life. Together, we are a couple of nerds.
Whether you're navigating the depths of the dungeon or the dynamics of your gaming table, we're here to explore the vibrant world of tabletop role-playing games with you.
Each episode, we dive into topics that every gamer can relate to, like, is there really such thing as too many dice?
Or how to keep the peace when your co-adventurer is also your co-pilot in life.
We share our own trials, triumphs, and tales from the enchanting world of Extraeus and beyond, all while connecting with you, our amazing TTRPG community.
From community polls to social media shoutouts, we want you to be part of our adventure. So grab your favorite set of dice
and join us as we embark on a quest to make your tabletop gaming experience more fun and meaningful.
This is You Heard It From Us,
where every episode is an adventure.
Welcome back, adventurers, to another episode of You Heard It From Us. I'm DnDWife, one of your hosts.
And I'm Dungeon Master Eguile, your seasoned DM. And as always, we're thrilled to have you all join us today.
Today, we're diving into the world of miniatures and asking the question, miniatures repaint, replace, or stay true?
But as always, before we begin, make sure to like, review, and subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. So, let's go ahead and just get started.
Absolutely. In this episode, we'll explore the significance of player minis, look at custom versus standard options.
We're also going to look into, as always, with our Heard From Us, our community polls.
Yeah.
We're going to look to see kind of how not only do our Discord members, but also some of our YouTube subscribers kind of feel about this topic at hand.
Yeah. And finally, we'll discuss the importance of character minis and how they contribute to the gaming experience, just because for me, they're an important part of our table, and I think they are for a lot of people as well.
Right. And so, let's just start on this little miniature adventure.
Yeah, let's get started.
So for me, when we really kind of posed this question, I think it was because we kind of noticed, like, at our table, as now we're on our third campaign.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we've noticed that we've kind of gone through a lot of different transitions of different kinds of minis, styles of minis.
Different themes.
Right, everything from custom to the brim, especially nowadays with things like Hero Forge and your own personal 3D printing.
Oh, yeah, and all the Etsy printers as well that just have their own designers that can create new ones for everybody.
Yeah, I think in, like, the grand scheme of things, I think we've kind of had every kind of mini. We've had, ones that were metal.
Yeah.
We had people that bought from Hero Forge, others that had friends with 3D printers kind of make one for them.
Yep.
Wasn't the most successful thing, but it worked. But I think that really kind of was what made us thought of, like, well, how does everyone else feel? And so looking at that kind of custom made versus standard minis.
On one hand, the standard minis are pre-made, so you just have the standard templates. They're easier to use, but they can also be more, just less detailed, I guess. There's not a lot to see when it comes to the standard minis, but custom minis, while they can be more expensive and time consuming to create, offer that unique personalization that standard minis can't really provide.
Yeah, I think it really just comes obviously to just like with every sport, right? Like every sport, every hobby, there's always kind of like your base level to entry into something. And then there's always like the high end quality. And even within like minis, that spread can be really big because there are some high end minis, and then there are just kind of you go to your favorite comic book shop, you pick one up for $5.99, and so really it comes down to there isn't one right way.
No, there's just preferences, to be honest.
But I feel like no matter what, your mini still is important. I mean, heck, when we first started this grand adventure, we used self-made laminated pieces of construction paper.
Yeah, we just printed them out, cut them out, laminated them, and cut that out.
Just moved them on. So I mean, really, it doesn't really matter kind of how you go, but it really kind of, I think, is kind of the stepping stones that kind of show where you are as a DM player, right?
Yeah.
Or a D&D player, because it can be that whole thing, like, so you start off, you're like, oh, I don't have a mini, I just use what I have. Here's a quarter,
right.
Here's a D6.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, this is a new guy, like this new, and then you see them there, you got the mini, it might not be painted,
right.
And you're like,
might
okay,
still be great.
But then when you see them with this like crazy mini where they're like, oh yeah, I can change out the equipment with magnets, and then you're like, okay, this person's obviously
they're prepared,
invested in D&D. So I mean, I'm a DM, so this doesn't affect me as much as it affects like you guys as players and everyone like that. So it was always kind of an interesting thing on my perspective, because for me, I can just take any mini I want and just kind of turn it into a creature or use it and that kind of stuff. So I don't really have kind of a significance to. Whereas like you, I think it's a little bit.
I've been a player.
It's a different experience, right?
and it's tough, because for my first 2 campaigns as Alira and as Brenna, those 2 miniatures were both pre-made, so I had no say in how they were drafted and printed.
Besides the paint job.
Sure, yeah. And so I think for Alira, I ended up choosing like a Yuan-Ti bard that I thought looked close enough that I could like make something really nice out of it. And I made sure like to smooth out the scaling stuff to just kind of make it more humanoid or like half elfin.
Right. Yeah. I remember you kind of tweaking it a little bit.
And then for Brenna, it was also a pre-made Aasimar that was already kind of, it's showing its wings and everything. So I didn't have to do much for either of those. Yeah. But for Luna, I had to go I went custom for that because kind of everyone was going custom. So I wanted to keep the uniformity of all the miniatures.
Well, yeah, because we have kind of this like pool that we take out. So we made it where at the starting of campaign 3, everyone got to have a custom mini purchased by the table. So that way we all got to kind of have that singular experience together of everyone got this custom, how they wanted their character to look. So that way, because, I knew we're going to have a long running campaign. So I really wanted you guys to really love the minis that you had and not kind of not really feel relegated to take the ones you have to.
Right. So yeah, you really gave us the freedom to choose exactly what we wanted. And I think that has really become the best part of having those custom miniatures.
And I think it really shows, just like with you and me, right? Like it is this kind of evolutionary process. You start off with a standard mini, and I feel like what ends up happening a lot of times, especially like in our group and a lot of the community, you're usually gifted your first mini.
Yeah.
Right? Like you come in and you're like, I don't really know. It's the same thing with like dice.
Nothing,
it's like dice, right? Usually you're like, oh, I don't have any dice. You watch as like 6 sets of dice suddenly appear in front of you. So I think a lot of that comes into that, right? So like your first mini is never really kind of like the one you picked out. It's given to you, but it's that much more important to you, right? And then as you play, you start upgrading to those custom minis with the special features, and then you can even go so far. And the newest thing, which I think is cool, is the pre-printed colored minis, right?
Yes, they're pre-painted for you.
But they're not even painted.
They're printed in that color.
They're printed in the color, so you don't even have to worry about wear and tear and the paint rubbing off. So it's like, okay, we can upgrade even more.
That does certainly add an extra bit of I guess, draw to the custom miniature.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm the DM, so I don't have quite the connections like you guys do with your minis.
Yeah, and on top of that, I think repainting or replacing minis can also reflect the character's progression. So that's a big draw towards buying more miniatures, even just for the same campaign and the same characters, just to show how the character has visually been affected by the journey.
Right. And for me, like I said, on the DM side, it's all about that immersion. When you get the new mini, and especially if you get like a new armor set that's a very like different color change.
Yeah, completely
and so,
separate.
So even if it's like a paint job, so I think we had like one character whose standard had like this kind of purplish black coat, and then they got this like bright blue and silver suit, right? And so it was cool because when you went in and you repainted the mini, and then when it showed up the next session, it was like, oh, holy crap, he's wearing it. Like it's right there. We all now know exactly what this person's wearing.
And now we know he's attuned to it. He's put it on.
Right,
it belongs to him
it became part of the character. Really and now the mini still kind of has that representation.
Yep, we have it on display.
But then there's always that issue of that it is a repaint job. So the original look is kind of lost, kind of gone.
Now that was one where I repainted that miniature was already pre-painted. It had been part of the water deep like brick that we had gotten. So it had already come with its own paint job, and I just went over that.
Right.
So it wasn't as bad in my opinion, I guess, as painting something that had already been painted either by myself or a previous artist. That might be a little more taboo in my opinion.
Right. And so I think that's just kind of that real cool way to also track your progress. You know, especially for us, and we're fortunate that we play a long running kind of single campaign,
style,
right?
yeah.
Like we don't run a lot of one shots.
No.
So for us, it can be where I mean, heck, we're already 2 years into our campaign now, and it feels like it's been 6 months.
Because in the world, it has been.
So when it comes to your minis, being able to kind of set aside a mini that represents a huge chapter in their lives, I think really kind of gives you that tangible way to see your character grow, to see it kind of progress. And then, you know, it's kind of that always you get to look back at your roots.
Yeah, you kind of... Seeing the progression, not only does it add the nostalgia of, oh, that's where I started, you know, it was so humble, but it can also provide references for other things like a custom artwork for your miniatures, things like that. And it really does do something, I guess, when you can display them at home and show what you did throughout the campaign. But conversely, also, you know, having replacing miniatures that come with each sort of big step in your journey can also add up. And then you have like 5 different miniatures just sitting in the back gathering dust.
Yeah.
So that's also a problem sometimes.
Yeah, I imagine that affects us DMs. And you're kind of in a weird, you're kind of in that weird pseudo space of being a player and a DM in the same categories.
A little bit, yeah.
You know, it'd be interesting to see if you get like some of the other players who are just players and see how they kind of feel if they're going to eventually get these like huge stockpiles of minis.
Of backlogs minis.
It'd be interesting to see like asking them like 4 or 5 years from now after this campaign and they
How
have like
many they have.
Right. I mean, one cool thing that we've always done is we actually like create like little monuments for our leftover minis.
Yeah,
Well,
little
leftover is a
displays.
bad word, but the minis that remained after the campaign. And I always thought it was really cool because when our players come over and they see this, it's like instant memory of all the adventures as soon as they see that mini, and it just shows how important.
That, you know?
Right, it just shows how important that is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so we really wanted to kind of also see, because obviously we saw it amongst ourselves, so we were kind of curious as to kind of what our community also thought.
Yeah, what did you guys think?
So we conducted a poll on our kind of various social medias, and we were asking the players the simple question: minis, do you repaint, replace, or stay true to the original minis?
Yeah. And it was fascinating to see the responses. And thank you first to everyone who participated. We love hearing from you guys. This is what the polls are for, so that we can use them for these episodes.
Yeah, and even though obviously we're not asking hundreds of thousands, though we fingers crossed will eventually be.
Yeah.
You know, every click, every vote matters. Everything kind of shows a little bit of our community, and hopefully as the kind of numbers go up, it'll show just how much we all kind of experience kind of similar experiences when we play TTRPGs.
How we all can share those as well in this great little community that we're building here.
So, you know, we as we looked over and we let it go for about a week or so and kind of let them kind of pick and choose.
Yeah.
But it was kind of basically what I assumed it was going to be just from my own personal experience. And that was that a majority of the voters said that they would upgrade their minis during the campaign.
Gotcha. Yeah, and you know, at least amongst our table, I found that we had a few who did repaint, a few who got their miniatures as they went, and a few who just stayed the course. But really, what it came down to is if you can paint the miniatures, then you're much more likely to repaint one than you are if, say, you don't really have that skill or you're not interested in that type of hobby and you just want to show your progress without doing all the hard work.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And I also think we're kind of a unique table in that, like, one of our little special things is that we have a dedicated mini painter, which is you. And so I think that does help a lot where our players are very comfortable in the fact that they can go out, buy a new mini, and they know that the concept in their head can be given to you, and you transform it into this crazy, good-looking mini.
I try my best.
Right? And so I think that also helps, too. Whereas if you happen to be at a table where there are no printing services or there's no painting services,
that could
you
be a problem.
might feel more relegated to, okay, I'm going to spend the little bit of extra money and I'll get a little bit better of a mini, you know? And so I think that really plays into it. And really when kind of looking at this, we only can really have speculation,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
We can't, we don't know. And we're a weird,
we can't read minds either.
We admitted we're a weird table ourselves and we're very unique and we might face challenges that no one has ever faced before.
Yeah.
But, we really, at least I feel like, is that really the upgrading mini is just that idea of growth, right?
To
For
show
me,
that.
as a dungeon master, it's kind of more of like the big bad minis are the important ones for me. Like,
Oh, gotcha, the evolving
the
villains.
big bosses, my huge undead dragon that's covered in pillow fluff and lights and stuff that we made custom.
Oh, like the miniatures we got for the Frost Maiden.
Right, yeah, stuff like that. So for me, it's more of they represent the story. So why wouldn't players want that too? Right. You see, you put your minis in an order, you can see kind of, oh yeah, that was the mini I used. And then I also think there's the other effect of that, the wear and tear, right? So, oh man, yeah, that I can see that's the spot where the hammer kept breaking off, and I had to keep super gluing it every other session. And I mean, we've had a few minis like that.
We've had a few.
And not only does the mini tell the character story, but it also tells the table story.
It really does. It's more than just a game piece, the miniature, especially when put together with other miniatures. They really become a visual representation of the history of the character, the places they've been, and just the story in general. It can really take you back to where you've been and give you a good idea. It just kind of remind you if you're ever feeling like, I don't quite remember.
Yeah, and I think it has that like pro and con though, because like for me, I think it's important on like major milestones, right?
True.
Like D&D specifically has a lot of those like 5, 10, 15, and 20.
It's true.
And so that really can mark a lot of the different kind of steps.
The upgrades, yeah.
You go from leather armor to chainmail, then eventually you're in plate
Scale
armor with
or
a
something,
flaming sword and wings and stuff. But I think it can get out of hand sometimes, because I do know that there also are players out there that's like, okay, here's my mini that's wearing its summer wear.
Right.
Here's my mini with armor, without armor, casual, going to the gown, going a gown to the gala.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the point where now you're kind of washing out the significance of the mini.
Because you have so many.
You have so many. And so like we have kind of a unique situation, which we've, kind of been dealing with. It's the first time on our table where a player does have two minis.
Two miniatures, yeah, and they're interchangeable, so it's not like, I just have this one for view. It's they get used interchangeably.
Right, and that can be a way that really kind of helps, because this is based on a character that can like physically transform.
Yeah.
So now we kind of always know
when she's
they're
transformed.
in that state. But we've been doing this for almost 8 years, and this is the first time we've ever really had two minis kind of being worked at once.
Every other time it's really just been to represent a sort of growth, and so it's been a replacement miniature for the current one, not really an added bonus, or so to speak.
And then I think there's obviously the people who upgrade just due to the damage of their mini. I can see someone buying the exact same mini, but then changing its color or its look,
upgrading its theme
because
a little bit.
The other one is a little warped or it's been damaged too much. So
it's just been touched so many times,
right? I mean, they get kind of that shiny spot on the head from all the finger grease and Cheeto dust and all the other things that we TTRPGs players are known for.
Yep.
But I really feel like the mini, as insignificant it might look, it really does add that emotional weight to an adventure or a campaign.
It really does. It's like capturing a memory in a snapshot. It's like, that's what I was when I was like, we were low level and just starting out, or that's what we were like at Endgame, and it was so fabulous.
Right. And so I think that's the most important thing we pulled out, was just the importance of character minis, and that it is such a touchy subject because everybody feels differently about their minis.
Oh, yeah.
And like I said, it's different for me. It's different for you, because we're not both players.
Yeah. I've been a DM, albeit it's like one shot. Okay.
one
so
shot.
I wouldn't really call it I'm a DM permanently, but I've done it a little bit. And so I've been on both sides, but for me, miniatures are deeply personal. All the characters I've had have their miniatures, and it's really just the one miniature. I don't tend to repaint or even to have multiples. I really just stick with the one with a theme that I like, and I just keep that for the
tried and true.
Yeah, for the remainder of the campaign. But they're important to me because they're a representation of my story as it goes.
I mean, obviously, you have 3. Some have been used way longer than others. But do you really have one that kind of stands out at this point? I mean, I know we've we've only just begun campaign 3.
Possibly my favorite is the Brenna miniature, because I wanted to give her these amazing rainbow colored wings with my glow paint.
It turned out so good too.
Yeah, so I did that, and then I did a sort of dry brush of gold over them to give them that golden shimmery effect.
I know, and it's a shame, obviously, that was our shortest campaign.
Yeah, that's okay.
Right, as we had to change things up due to having a member leave to move to a different state.
Yeah, short but sweet. It was a wonderful campaign.
Right, and so, but then the nice thing is like we're saying, that mini now is always going to be there to remind you of Brenna.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's just, and not only that, but that's one where she also had a companion miniature as well. My trusty steed, my ram.
Right, and they have the matching golds and all that, which was a really cool aesthetic to kind of create on there.
Yeah, so that's one that I just really look fondly on, because I really loved working on her miniature and painting it.
Yeah, and I think that's funny because, we had another player who played a character named Chris, and this gentleman, he had the full gambit.
Oh yes, from start to end.
I mean, I think Chris ended up with like 4 or 5 different alliterations of its.
There's 3.
Is there 3? I thought there was 4 or 5.
I'm pretty sure I've only painted 3.
Gotcha.
There was her original form, which was dressed like a priestess, very modest. It was just robes, nothing crazy. And then it moved on to like a sort of basic armor look, and then she moved on to the player moved on to a custom miniature that was in like full plate, full wingspan, sword out, shield blazing. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool, because when we had all the minis and we could put them in order, it does create that cool effect, right? Like, and I think that's a takeaway that we really push for players, is that's creating your own memories right there with just your minis. Like, don't just toss your minis. Don't just put them to use for something else.
Them.
I mean, even me as a DM, like when I select my big bads, especially when they're like normal humanoid minis, it's almost like once I use them, I can't ever use them again for something else.
Yeah.
Because even
tough.
to me, as the dungeon master, me making that person have a name, and they're not just like guard number 5.
And now they have a miniature that represents them.
Right. So like for campaign 1, we had this kind of like League of Doom kind of ripoff that were all these different, basically disgruntled NPCs that had been messed with silently and in the background from the players the entire campaign.
Oh, yeah.
Essentially the team that was designed to get rid of what they interpret was the bad guys.
Yep.
And I have yet to use them in anything else. And
they're just so iconic.
And it's been years since those characters are anything. But I just, when I see them, it just changes. And so, for me as a DM, I see players investing in their minis, and I see that as a commitment to the playing, right? So when you're not just like, I got it in this sock somewhere. Here's my gray scale. It's not painted. I don't really care. And everyone's using traditional miniatures, right? And they pull out a Lego minifig.
Oh, I know.
And it's like, okay, close, but not really, I get it, but it kind of ruins the aesthetic.
Takes us out of the immersion a bit.
But I like it with the minis, especially when you have these personalized, personally painted ones, because you have that connection to the character. You have that attachment you wouldn't really have if you're just borrowing somebody's.
And how do using miniatures per se versus what we were using before, the little tokens that were 2D, how does that affect your game now?
I mean, obviously, one is perspective, obviously, right?
True.
Like having the flat pieces of paper and glare and everything was just a pain to keep track of everything.
Very true.
But once we move to like a 3D perspective, and then obviously our own individual minis, it does definitely help in terms of placement on combat. Like that was a godsend, being able to really kind of see, okay, you can kind of put your eye behind your mini and be like, can I see that person through the door frame? Whereas if you have a flat piece of paper,
it's tougher to tell.
It's kind of hard to explain to your player, like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
And you can't really like show them at the
How?
level.
Because all the walls are 2D.
And then, it just, besides just enhancing the immersion, it's the connection too, because now in that like subconscious part of their head, they think, oh, okay, well, if I take too much damage, then my mini might take damage. And if my mini takes damage, that's a horrible thing that can be. So I really do like that atmosphere that it kind of creates, and and how everyone kind of sits with their mini in front of them, and you kind of see them waiting to just be able to put their mini on the table. Everyone's kind of chomping to be like, okay, where am I? I want to see me. I want to unveil. I want to see it. So for me, that's always been, it not only helps them engage, but me too, because whenever a DM sees their players be excited, that's going to make them excited, because that's kind of what we feed off of. So when, someone's totally worried about how their mini goes, or they're making sure that the mini is pointed in the right direction because they want to stick to the, the story hand, I think that's always going to make a session more vivid, more creative, and just come out with a whole better experience in the long run.
I think the sign of someone who's truly committed is anyone who does like a custom base for their mini.
I mean, there are obviously, like we were talking about, like the tiers of how deep you want to go down the mini hole of creation and all the customizations you can get.
Absolutely.
But I think it really just kind of helps with having that, connection. And D&D, especially TTRPGs, they're tough because of the whole theater of the mind aspect. And as much as we want to be creative types, it's hard sometimes unless you have the physical representation.
The imagination can only take you so far. So sometimes some props are needed, some props are required. This is why acting has props. Because it just helps immerse
it just helps you bring you to that space that you probably, though you could have got there, it might have taken you longer.
Exactly.
And now you've wasted half the session just trying to get in the right frame of mind.
Whereas minis just play a crucial role in campaigns. They bring characters to life, whether they're the player characters themselves or the NPCs in the world that populate it. I mean, how many times have we been in a town or somewhere where you've just put out the display of the town and there are people in there, blacksmiths working, vendors, and it really makes the game world tangible to us.
And I mean, like you said, speaking of the NPCs and stuff, and I think that's where on a DM side it really becomes important to have kind of the miniatures, especially for your monsters and your creatures, because that's the other side of things. As much as a player can have their mini, if the world they have as well is not very populated,
that can be tough.
Too. And you have to balance. And I mean, I'm currently, we have a session coming up, and I have to kind of balance. It's like, okay, this mini kind of looks like what I want it to look like, but it's not perfect. So the players are going to have to use their imaginations and okay, this rock elemental is a sand elemental, and so it's kind of the same but different. So, but there are times where you do want to try to have that mini that does fit, right? So, I mean, there's nothing cooler as a DM than, you save up, you finally get this really cool large dragon miniature, and when the players are kind of sitting there going, oh, when's the next wolves coming, and you're able to drop down this giant adult red dragon, I think by them seeing their miniature compared and then seeing this giant miniature, that I think is what is the perfect combination.
Absolutely, the size ratio is the thing. It
puts it all together, and I think that's the harmony we create by why we think and why we feel like minis are so important.
Absolutely, and they also serve as keepsakes long after the campaign ends. Those miniatures are reminders of the adventures we shared, the friendships we made, the connections at the table. Like, who was your player character's best friend in the campaign?
Right, or especially when I especially love it when you have like little companion characters, right? So like in campaign 2, one character had a kind of young adult owlbear that rolled around named
bright white
named Snowball. Right, and so it's so cool because by having that mini and we keep it on our little mantle, it automatically we're reminded of the impact, as well as by seeing the little tiny mini next to this giant what is supposed to be a baby owlbear.
Absolutely,
it really kind of showed where you guys later were like, man, if we made that thing mad, or if it really wanted to kill us, we were done for. Like, there was nothing we were going to do. We were going to be owlbear food.
I mean, we were so close to it, and we really had, a lot of us had to take the time to get to know the poor owlbear, but it became so iconic as part of our team.
And I think it would, if I hadn't had that mini, I don't think it would have had the same effect. You guys would have thought, oh, it's this little tiny cub the size of a terrier.
Or we would have forgotten about it entirely.
Well, me, it's like you would have assumed, oh, cub. It's a little bear cub. It's like a terrier. No, it's not like, a Volkswagen Beetle.
It's ginormous.
And it's only 6 months old.
Right. It's gonna get bigger.
But it's just always wonderful to look back at those minis and just remember the stories and just see them also as the gaming history that they are.
Yeah.
Because it's like twofold, right? Just as much as the DM sees them and remembers, the players get to kind of always, in a moment, kind of relive a little bit of their glory adventuring days by just kind of looking over their mini for a little bit.
Yeah, it's so nice, especially, later as time goes on and life moves on and maybe you have less time to play, you can really look back on good times.
And I think that's really the big thing is because honestly, with the minis they are and with their biggest weakness being just touch too much,
right.
as you have taught me as my player, as you're constantly being like, don't touch the top, base, touch the base, don't ruin the paint. I've heard this a lot if you haven't noticed.
Or just seal it.
We're starting to do that more often. But it really goes to show these can last for a long time. And as much as it can be, oh man, it's a big cost. It's a worthy investment.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's always going to be something important to player and DM alike.
10/10 would recommend miniatures for the win.
So really to recap today, we discussed obviously the significance of players' minis.
Yeah.
We also wanted to look a little bit on to see kind of if we were crazy people or if the other people out there kind of had the same kind of ideas around minis and all that kind of stuff. And then we also explored why we feel it is very important to kind of upgrade your mini and kind of keep that progression going and why it's so important.
We also talked about how miniatures just enhance the gaming experience and help create lasting memories for everyone involved.
Yeah, I mean, I think it really goes just like every kind of video game we play, right? The first character you made in Skyrim.
Yeah.
You always kind of every now and then go back and log into the game and look at
they're doing.
Just to see how your character's looking, right? So it just shows that we kind of have this fundamental attachment to these representations. And what better than the item, the mini you went to literal war with.
Right, a tangible representation of that.
Right, so you always want to keep that. And I think, absolutely. I mean, even us, if we ever stop doing it, I think we'll eventually just seal all our minis in a curio cabinet and they'll just be on display like a museum. Because they're going to always carry that memory.
Yeah, or create little displays with terrain and stuff so that they can look as if they're still in the story.
Right.
I always love that.
Dioramas. I'm down. Later when we retire, that's going to be our D&D dioramas.
Absolutely.
Coming soon in our retirement.
But thank you for joining us on this miniature journey. We loved having you with us.
But also, don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to our podcast. Your support means the world to us. We've set up a new style now, so all of these podcasts are individual now. So please resubscribe, re-like, get these new podcasts off and running so that we can see more and more people out there experience our podcast.
We've also got different playlists on YouTube as well, and you can join our Discord community to share your thoughts and continue the conversation. If you have a differing idea or a story of your own that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear about your own miniature stories.
And also, we have a brand new website to check out all links to our favorite podcasting platforms at shows.acast.com/you heard it from us.
Absolutely.
With all hyphens in between.
Until next time, keep rolling those dice and let your adventures be ever epic. Thanks for tuning in to You Heard It From Us.
We hope you enjoyed the adventure and picked up a few tips for your own gaming table. But the journey doesn't end here.
We'd love to hear from you. Join our Couple of Nerds Discord community where you can share your thoughts, ask questions, and suggest topics for future episodes. Whether you're a seasoned player or just starting out, there's a spot for everyone at our table.
To keep up with all our latest adventures and episodes, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep the magic alive and connects us with even more amazing listeners like you.
And remember, you can find us on all major podcast platforms. Just search for You Heard It From Us and hit that subscribe button.
We can't wait to see you on Discord and hear your stories. Together, we can make the world of tabletop gaming even more magical.
Until next time, keep rolling those dice.
And may your adventures be legendary.